There is a house built out of stone, wooden floors, walls, and window sills, tables and chairs worn by all of the dust. This is a place where I don't feel alone. This is a place where I feel at home. And I built a home for you, for me, until it disappeared from me, from you. And now it's time to leave and turn to dust. Out in the garden where we planted the seeds, there is a tree as old as me. Branches were sown by the color of green. Ground had risen past its knees. By the cracks of the skin, I climbed to the top. I climbed the tree to see the world. When the gusts came around to blow me down, held on as tightly as you held on to me, held on as tightly as you held on to me. And I built a home for you, for me, until it disappeared from me, from you. And now it's time to leave
Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. My name is Joan McNeil. I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Team, and I'm your service leader for this, our 6th annual National Housing Day service. National Housing Day falls on the anniversary of the date in 1998 when the Big City Mayor's Caucus of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities declared that homelessness and unaffordable housing had become a national emergency. The cause of the emergency was the federal government's decision a few years earlier to withdraw from funding social and co-op housing. That emergency persists, affecting not only those forced to live in tents throughout Hamilton and other cities, or people that we consider poor, but many thousands of Hamilton households struggling with housing costs that have become unaffordable, even for many with good jobs. Our speaker today is Mohammed Bissat, a staff lawyer with the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic, specializing in housing law, and an anti-racism, anti-oppression advocate. Welcome, Mohammed, and thank you for joining us to share your wisdom. I want to thank today's service team, which includes our musicians, Lila Miklos, who we just heard, Rachel Derry and Cindy Carey, and today's technical team of John Elliott and Tim Versteeg. Most of you are familiar now with using Zoom. I would mention only that right now everyone has been muted. We occupy land that our colonial ancestors took from the original inhabitants of this land. This displacement left them homeless in the deep sense of being torn from connections to the land that defined their physical, economic, social, and spiritual life. As a congregation, we have committed ourselves to dismantling racism and other oppressions that were reflected in those actions. We seek a new, more humble relationship of respect and dignity with the First Nations and all peoples of this land. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you live, and wherever you are in your search for meaning, today you are one of us, and we welcome you. Our congregational mission is to nurture one another, serve the community, and inspire action to heal the world. We are called to worship with these words from author Matthew Desmond. The home is the center of life. It is a refuge from the grind of work, the pressure of school, and the menace of the streets. We say that at home we can be ourselves. It is where our identity takes root and blossoms. In languages spoken all over the world, the word for home encompasses not just shelter, but warmth, safety, family. Our chalice is a reminder of the light and hope of our faith. So please join me in saying our unison chalice lighting words. Ooh, sorry. There. May this flame be our light of friendship and love. Our Canvas team of Mary Eve, Michelle Corbet, and Sue Stewart Green have some news to share with us this morning.
Good morning, everybody. You will be happy to know that our annual Canvas Pledge campaign to raise funds for next year's operating budget has now come to a close. On behalf of the Canvas team, I am pleased to announce that pledges received as of this morning surpassed our goal by 1%. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your financial support for our spiritual home during this, our second COVID era pledge campaign. I know there were many challenges and we are just thrilled. Thank you so much for your support. You made the campaign theme of trees a reality by demonstrating that we are indeed together, resilient, engaging, enduring, and solid. Celebration plans are on hold for the time being until we can be together in person at the church. I would like to thank my hardworking Canvas teammates, Michelle Corbet and Sue Stewart Green, for their dedication and contributions to the campaign. And thanks to our unofficial, but oh so important member of the team, our church support services manager and wearer of many hats, Bruce McPherson. And now I will pass this over to Sue Stewart Green, who has just a few more words of thanks. Thank you once again.
I was in charge of the callers, which I've done for a few years, and people always feel a bit bad for me, like it's a terrible job. But I have to say, it's pretty rewarding. It allows you to connect with people who may be separated from the church for whatever reason. And our team was pretty fantastic this year. So I do want to thank Brad Berquist, Elizabeth Beckett, Kath McIntyre, Pat Weber, Renata Manthe, and Monica Bennett. The funds that were brought in during this after calling time represent 10%. So this is substantial. So we certainly want to encourage people to put their pledge in before, and it would be ideal if we didn't have any callers, but just to say that it's really an interesting job. And I want to thank those people that step up and do something that a lot of folks don't really want to do. So it was worthwhile. Thank you. It was a pleasure to work with you all. And I guess in an ideal world, we'll work ourselves out of a job. But as long as there's a good team to do this, I think it bodes well for the longevity and future of our church. Thank you very much.
Number 1, may nothing evil cross this door. May nothing evil cross this door, and may your fortune never pry about these windows. May the roar and rain go by. My faith made strong, the rafters will withstand the battering of the storm. This hearth, though all the world grow chill, will keep you warm. Peace shall walk softly through these rooms, touching our lips with holy wine, till every casual corner blooms into a shrine. With laughter drown the raucous shouts, and though these sheltering walls are thin, may they be strong to keep hate out and hold love in.
Our story for all ages today is The Fair Housing 5 and the Haunted House, which was written by members of the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center, which works to eradicate discrimination in housing in that city. It was illustrated by Shakira Mahdi. Hi, my name is Samaria, and I'm in the 5th grade. These are my friends. The 5 of us like spending time together because we have a lot in common. Ricardo and James like sports. Chelsea and Layla like to draw. James and I like to play music. This is our clubhouse. We built it ourselves under an old oak tree. We come here after school to do our homework and play. I like everything about our clubhouse, but it wasn't always that way. Once upon a time, there was a big, empty house across the street from our clubhouse, and we didn't like it at all. A for rent sign sat out front, but nobody ever moved in. When people visited the house, they always left quickly, looking troubled. Every night, a single lamp glowed through an upstairs window, and when it was windy out, the big iron gate would rattle and shake. We were sure the house was haunted. One night, I came home and found my mother at the kitchen table with the newspaper spread out in front of her. "What's going on?" I asked. She smiled. "It's time for us to move to a new apartment. Why don't you help me look?" I sat down next to her. There were lots of houses listed on the page, and together we looked at them one by one. My mom was thinking about grown-up things. "We need a place that's closer to your school and my office, and it needs to be a price we can afford," she said. I was thinking about kid things. "I want my own bedroom, and I wanted to live close to my friends," I said. Finally, we found the perfect place. It had 2 bedrooms, one for my mom and one for me. It was near the school and not too far from my mom's work. There was a grocery store down the street and a bus stop on the corner. And the best part was it was right across the street from my clubhouse. I looked closer. The picture in the paper was of the haunted house. The next day, we went to see the apartment after school. I was afraid. My mom didn't know that the house was haunted. I gripped her hand as we passed the clanging iron gate. I closed my eyes tight when she rang the doorbell. I heard heavy footsteps, the sound of a lock, and the creak of a door. "Hi, are you here to look at the apartment?" I opened my eyes. It wasn't a ghost, a monster, or a vampire who stood before us. It was just a regular man, and behind him was a very nice house. The man's smile vanished instantly when my mother said, "Hello, and this is my daughter, Samaria." "Oh, I'm sorry," he said. "I don't rent to families with children." He shut the door. My mother shook her head. "Well, I guess we'll have to keep looking," she said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt confused. Why didn't the landlord want to rent to a family with kids? Had I done something wrong? I felt sad. The house was perfect for us, especially now that I knew it wasn't haunted. What if other landlords turned us away? What would we do if we couldn't find a place to live? The next day, I told my friends what had happened. "It just doesn't seem fair," Chelsea said, frowning. "And why wouldn't someone want to rent to a family with kids in the first place?" added Lila. "Having kids in the neighborhood is a good for everyone. Without kids, who would organize kickball games in the park? Who would set up lemonade stands on hot days?" That gave me an idea. This calls for a top secret investigation. We want to know if the landlord is turning away other families. So let's set up a lemonade stand in front of the clubhouse on Saturday. We'll use it to spy on the house from across the street. And that's exactly what we did. Saturday morning was quiet. I counted 2 dog walkers and 3 morning joggers, but not one person came in or out of the house across the street. But all of a sudden, a car pulled up front, and a woman got out with a kid about our age and a little baby. We saw her disappear into the house. I wasn't surprised when a few minutes later she came out with a frown on her face. "Are you going to move into the house?" I asked. "No, I'm not moving in," the woman said. "The landlord doesn't want to rent to a family with kids. It's too bad because my son is about your age. You could be friends." I wanted to tell the woman that I knew how she felt, but I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to give away our top secret investigations. 1 hour, 2 more dog walkers, and a fire engine later, a woman got off the bus and walked up to the house across the street. She didn't have any children with her. Surely the landlord would rent to her, I whispered to my friends. But to my surprise, the woman was back out on the street in no time. "Are you going to move into the house?" I asked. "No, I'm not moving in," the woman huffed. "The landlord thought I would prefer to live in a neighborhood with more people like me." "What does that mean?" I asked, confused. The woman frowned. "I don't think he rents to Black people." I looked around at my friends. All of us were different races. Why did it matter? 2 hours, 3 more joggers, and an ice cream truck later, a man walked up with his dog. The man was white like the landlord and didn't have any kids with him. Surely the landlord will rent to him, I whispered to my friends. But to my surprise, a couple of minutes later, the man was back out on the sidewalk. Are you going to move into the house? I asked. No, I'm not moving in, the man shrugged and patted his dog. I'm blind and my guide dog helps me get around, but the landlord said I'm not allowed to keep a dog in the house, so I can't live here. I thought about people I knew who needed certain things to get around because of their disabilities. Why should they be treated any differently? As the sun began to set, we were sure something was wrong. Why would the landlord turn away so many nice people just because of their race, disability, or the fact that they had kids? Maybe he wants to keep certain kinds of people from moving to the neighborhood, James said. That made me angry. That's not fair. It's our neighborhood too, I cried. After all, our clubhouse was across the street. On the way home, I thought about how my mom and I still didn't have a place to live. In school the next day, Ms. Butler was teaching a history lesson. Once, not too long ago, Black people in our country couldn't live in certain neighborhoods just because of their race, she told us. Now, what are some reasons people choose to live where they do? I knew the answer to this question. My mom and I just talked about it. Well, my mom and I need to live close to school and her work, I said, and we need a place with 2 bedrooms that we can afford. Yes, said Miss Butler. Those are important things to think about when choosing a home. Now, what if someone took away your opportunity to choose? How would it feel if someone decided that a house wasn't right for your family just because of your race or religion, because your family has kids, or because you have a disability? I knew the answer to that question too. I would feel sad and upset, I said, and things would be a lot harder for my family. Mrs. Butler explained that when someone takes away opportunities from a group of people just because of who they are, that's called discrimination. Discrimination makes life harder for a lot of families. Many brave people have fought to stop it. She told us how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led marches into neighborhoods where Black people were not welcome. The marchers were folks just like us who stood strong in the belief that discrimination is wrong, she said. Because of their courage, there are now rules against discrimination in housing. I snuck a glance at my friends. Suddenly, everything was making sense. I raised my hand. My mom and I tried to rent a house, and the landlord told us he doesn't rent to families with kids. Then I told her about our top secret investigation. When I was done, Miss Butler smiled. Even though discrimination is against the rules, it still happens. When you get home from school, tell your mom to call the Fair Housing Center. They help people who are treated unfairly when they are looking for a home. I did just that. My mom called the Fair Housing Center and they listened to our story. A week later, we got a call back. Using our investigation, the Fair Housing Center proved the landlord was discriminating. They were going to work with us and the landlord to make sure that my mom and I could move into the apartment. I couldn't wait to tell my friends and Miss Butler the next day. Thanks to us, the Fair Housing Center will make sure the landlord treats people fairly from now on, I told them after class. Congratulations, said Miss Butler. You are really made a difference. You should call yourselves the Fair Housing 5. Back at the clubhouse, we celebrated and made plans. We should tell our families about fair housing, said Ricardo, and our friends at school, added James. And just then there was a knock at the door. Who could it be? Didn't they see the sign, keep out? We couldn't let just anyone in. But then I remembered what it felt like to be turned away from a house I wanted to live in. If houses should be open to everyone, so should our clubhouse. I opened the door wide. Come on in, I smiled. My name is Samaria. We have some very important work to do. Want to help? That's our story for today.
Thank you, Tim. In these moments of contemplation, I invite you to relax, close your eyes if you like, and breathe deeply. Following our reading, there will be a few moments of silence and then music. This morning's reading is from Matthew Desmond's book, Evicted. And he says, if tenants don't have to dedicate 70 or 80% of their income to rent, they could keep their kids fed and clothed and off the streets. They could settle down in one neighborhood and enroll their children in one school. providing them with the opportunity to form long-lasting relationships with friends, role models, and teachers. They could start a savings account with to buy their children toys and books, perhaps even a home computer. The time and emotional energy they spend making rent, delaying eviction, or finding another place to live when homeless could instead be spent on things that enrich their lives. For example, community college classes, exercise, finding a good job. Without stable shelter, everything else falls apart. So let's take a minute to think about that.
I'll not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. I'll do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. I'll not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. I'll do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. I'll not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. I'll do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. I'll not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. I'll do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. I'll not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. I'll do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now.
And now we'll hear our guest speaker, Mohammed Basat.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Mohammed, or Mo for short. My pronouns are he, him. So as said, I'm a staff lawyer at the Hamilton Legal Clinic. And I sit on a number of committees that work to build a more robust, anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and decolonized society. Before I go any further, I wanted to thank Bill for asking me to be a part of your Sunday morning. I'm always grateful to have the opportunity to speak to fellow community members. Now, I wanted to preface that what I'll be sharing with you comes from my own lived experiences, and I would never call myself an expert. My experiences certainly do not speak for other peoples of color, nor does it speak for Black folks and Indigenous folks. all these different groups are not a monolith. So Bill has asked me actually to speak about why I do this work and what I have seen in my line of work as a housing lawyer. And it's actually really interesting because I'm not often asked why it is that I do this work. It's usually a question about the work in itself. So I've been thinking about it for a few weeks, and it's such a complex question, and I'll do my best, I think, to answer it. But I think when I look back, I've been profoundly shaped by, I think, my parents' experiences, and then my own lived experiences as I've come to see the world. So, by way of background, I'm a half Filipino, half Arab brown person. I was born in Saudi Arabia in the city of Jeddah and lived there for 9 years. If you don't know much about the community and the city there, it's at the time, and for the most part still is, quite an oppressive society, especially if you are not of Saudi Arabian descent, and especially if you are darker skinned. So in that time, I was quickly introduced to what it was like to live in an oppressed society, and I saw firsthand specifically how my mother was treated. So my mom is from a small village in the Philippines called Gubat. She grew up very poor. Her father was a rice farmer, and my grandmother was a shopkeeper. She's actually the only person in her family that to have been able to work abroad. My father, he's a Lebanese Arab, and was born and raised in Beirut. He lived through quite a number of experiences, and notably, he lived through when Israel invaded Beirut in the late 70s, early 80s. And experienced firsthand what it was like to live in a country plagued with the consequences of years of colonization. So they grew up very much worlds apart. And so my parents are an interracial couple. And with that, it brought a number of experiences that opened my eyes to what it feels like and what it means to be different than someone else. Additionally, my mom was raised Catholic and my dad was raised Muslim. And I like to think that I think that's probably why my own marriage is also an interfaith marriage. My wife is Christian, and I was raised Muslim. So I moved to Canada when I was 9 years old in 1995 to a small town in Belleville, about an hour and a half east of Toronto. At the time, my family, we were the only non-white people in the area. Other than as well as a reserve that was about 20 minutes away from us. So I think, those experiences growing up in a town where from the moment I arrived, I was declared as an other and made to feel like I didn't belong very quickly, profoundly shaped how I saw the world. And I went to a high school that was unique in that we had Indigenous people that were bussed into our high school, and most of them ended up being very close friends throughout my high school career. And I saw and related to a lot of their own experiences. And I think seeing and experiencing what it felt like to be othered, what it feels like to be a brown person, what it feels like to even have the name Muhammad, shaped me and making me want to pursue this line of work. So it's interesting from a very young age, I was drawn to this work. In the story for all, Martin Luther King was mentioned. And so Dr. King was a huge influence on me. I used to often read his stuff through high school, as was Nelson Mandela. And from there, the trajectory was towards finding a work and career within social justice. It was very much a mission from the very beginning that I would end up where I was. Now, I never knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. I think it was halfway through undergrad where I had spoken with a professor and they'd asked me how I wanted to create an impact in my community. And after thinking about it, I thought that the law would be the best place to do that. But interestingly enough, I think living in Hamilton and seeing community members like yourself that are committed to taking up the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression and decolonization, I'm slowly realizing that the law isn't actually the best place to take up that work and make a large impact, where lawyers are nothing but another tool in a toolbox for community members to utilize. We're just really a mouthpiece for the work that community members should be doing. So that's in a quick nutshell what shaped me and wanted me to push me into doing this work. And as I've gotten older and was armed with the vocabulary and the understanding to do this work, I often make it a mission of mine to share this work with others, and people that are often hesitant or are afraid of learning about anti-racism, anti-oppression, and decolonization. I want to always reiterate to them that this work is just really, it's radical love fully realized. The best way to, love your fellow person and to make sure that your community is whole is to take up this work. So in terms of my own work within housing, so I started at the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic in 2019. So I've actually only been a lawyer for 3 years. So I'm quite new to the work. And in my 3 years, have seen a tremendous shift in the way that housing has been commodified, how housing has been weaponized against lower income folks, BIPOC folks, disabled folks, and folks that generally aren't seen as desirable tenants. And what we're seeing now is, what you'll see in the news is the big sensationalized stories of renovictions. And you're often seeing that developers are coming in and wanting to take away a home from people who have lived there for a number of years. And really, at the end of the day, actually, renovictions are actually a small part of what's causing people to lose their homes. I would encourage anybody to spend a day going to the landlord and tenant board as an observer and seeing what that process is like, more so now than ever that they've made a commitment to a digital first approach. And I heard this morning people were saying that they're now finally getting a hang of Zoom, after a number of weeks of having to be in this, you're starting to get used to it. Now imagine having your home on the line and suddenly having to enter into an atmosphere where you're unsure, that you're pushed into it. And then not only that is not potentially having the technology or the experience to go into a hearing where you have to be there digitally. And it's become essentially a factory, a quick access factory for people to be evicted, not just through renovictions. So that's a major component of what's affecting people's homes every single day. The other massive portion of that is the priorities of our community, the priorities of our government, the priorities of our political representatives. They have always seen, at least in the last, I would say, 30 years, especially since the Mike Harris government, they've seen housing as a profit machine, as housing as a means to make money, a means to invest. When for a long time, researchers, community members, advocates have long said that housing is actually a human right. Housing is a social determinant of health. And when that shift changed and housing became other than that, something that's essential to people living a healthy and happy life, it morphed into what we're seeing now. And I fear every day in my caseload and people that are coming into our office that it's only going to keep getting worse because mechanisms aren't being placed to curtail what's happening right now. In the city, there was a big discussion about the boundary expansion that just happened. And you heard some counselors saying that it had to happen because it would affect affordable housing. Others are advocating that it shouldn't happen and intensification should happen. And, neither of those things really are the silver bullet to curing affordable housing. Whether we expand a boundary or not, and I'll just let you know that I was against the boundary expansion as someone that believes in what we need to do to address climate change. But it's what we're seeing is a huge loss of homes, and it has really nothing to do with that. And a lot of it is the system in that which we live in, which is based on capitalism and white supremacy, and seeing homes as a commodity. It's no longer as being seen as a place for people to live and grow. My family, when we first came to Canada, we were lucky enough to be able to live in community housing. So we lived there for 3 years. And my parents didn't have anything when we came to Canada. And just having that 3 years in community housing where our rent was tied to the income that my parents were bringing in. At the time, my mom was just going back to school and my father was working on a mushroom farm, not bringing in very much money. And that gave us a chance. That gave our family a chance to kind of put roots down in the community and be able to buy a home. And unfortunately now, because we've moved away from that, the wait list in Hamilton has grown to over 7 years for people to actually be able to access that. So while we're seeing rent evictions as the current, soup du jour in Hamilton as a way to get people out, it's really one tool, and it's not often actually the best tool to get people out. Developers have become savvy in the way that they're getting rid of tenants. About 2 years ago, we saw one building owner just let their building completely fall into shambles and force the city to condemn the building, and then the city evicted the people. They didn't even have to do it. They didn't have to compensate any of the tenants. They didn't have to deal with any of the publicity. They just let the city have to do it because they were forced to. And then now you can see it. It's on John Street and King William. They're remaking it, and what will end up happening is they're going to redo those apartments and they're going to rent out for $1,800 a month. When most people that were living there were paying $500 a month. So in sharing all of this and looking around in Hamilton, we're really at a crucial point where you're seeing young Black, Indigenous, peoples of color on the streets begging for community members and politicians to take this seriously, to prioritize money into housing. You're going to see this year an increase in, for example, the police budget, which has always been a tool weaponized against low-income renters. I see that every day, that it's a tool weaponized against renters. It's a tool weaponized against people of color. You'll see their budget going up, but every year in the last 10 years, our crime rates is going down. And at the same time, we're not seeing a massive priority and a massive investment in housing. Even federally, if you look at the federal budget, the housing actual purse is actually 0.8% of the entire federal budget is put towards housing. So the amount of emotional labor for people of color to do this work, will really pale in comparison, especially if you're a white person, to also take this work up, to call your council members, to persistently badger them. My own ward councilor really doesn't like me because of the amount of times that I email him every single day to remind him of his obligations as a councilor. And I ask of people to do that because, as you know, you heard earlier today, the encampments, it's only going to get worse because not enough is being done to actually address the root causes of that symptom. That because really encampments are just a symptom of a much larger issue that is tied to capitalism, that's tied to the commodification of housing, that's tied to our legal system. A couple of years ago, they cut legal aid by $133 million, and a lot of people didn't really say anything. And now we're seeing that effect trickle down. Like in Hamilton, we're the biggest legal clinic in the entire province. And as of March of this year, we're only going to have 3 housing lawyers to serve a massive population. So we're often having to turn people away because of the fact that we just don't have capacity. And we're often taking on stuff when we really shouldn't be taking on stuff because it puts too much on our plate on top of the other work that we do. So it's imperative for folks like yourself to take up this work, to be on the streets when you see groups on the streets protesting for this work, because right now there's a case that's of rent eviction that's about to happen, and when I look at it from a legal perspective, they likely will get what they're seeking because they did the groundwork. And really, to be able to reverse what's about to happen, it's going to take community protest, it's going to take community outrage, it's going to take outreach to politicians to really actually stop it. The law, unfortunately, is bound by walls that are written by ordinary people. And you have to influence those ordinary people to change and expand those walls to create a place for people to be able to find a home and interpret what housing actually looks like. So that's the end of what I'll be saying today, but I know Bill has said that there'll be a question and answer period, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that may come up.
121, We'll Build a Land. We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them gardens instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land, building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restore
we extinguish our chalice and send you forth with these words of hope from the late historian Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. If we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents. And to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory. Okay, the Welcoming Congregation team would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which has just passed. On November 20th each year, the Transgender Day of Remembrance, we remember and mourn our transgender siblings who have been killed due to their transgender status. According to the tracking work of transrespect.org, at least 375 transgender people were killed around the world this past year. Let us mourn them, remember the value of their lives, and build a more loving future for all. To join in that remembrance, Lila has chosen the following song for our postlude.
You got your mother in a whirl. She's not sure if you're a boy or a girl. Hey babe, your hair's alright. Hey babe, let's go out tonight. You like me and I like it all. We like dancing and we look divine. You love bands when they're playing hard. You want more and you want it fast. They put you down, they say I'm wrong. You tacky thing, you put them on. Rebel, rebel, you torn your dress. Rebel, rebel, your face is a mess. Rebel, rebel, how could they know? Hot tramp, I love you so. You got your mother in a whirl, 'cause she's not sure if you're a boy or a girl. Hey babe, your hair's alright. Hey babe, let's stay out tonight. You like me and I like it all. We like dancing and we look divine. You love bands when they're playing hard. You want more and you want it fast. They put you down, they say I'm wrong. You tacky thing, you put them on. Rebel, rebel, you've torn your dress. Rebel, rebel, your face is a mess. Rebel, rebel, how could they know? Hot tramp, I love you so. You torn your dress, your face is a mess. You can't get enough, but enough ain't the test. You got your transmission and your live wire. You got your Q line and a handful of lewds. You wanna be there when they count up the dudes. So what you wanna know? Calamity's child, 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 where'd you wanna go? What can I do for you? Looks like you've been there too. 'Cause you torn your dress and your face is a mess. And your face is a mess. How could they